Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to It Is What It Is podcast with Jeff Fauntleroy. Today, we're going to start off. I wanted to get this video out and this podcast out today because today we're going to start going into a series of, and yes, I have the shirts. They are available. I'll let you know how to get them. You can hit me up, email me. I'll give you more information on where to get the t-shirt. Okay. But right now, we're going to get into, and I want to thank everybody for coming on today and being a part of this podcast. We're on Anchor FM, Anchor.fm on our podcast, and we're going to be streaming through YouTube today also because I want you to see me as I speak about this particular subject. Today, we're going to be talking about the Trinity of a black cop. The Trinity of a black cop. Let me first start off by saying I know a lot about this, okay? And I was a police officer for 25 years. The first couple of years I spent as a civilian, and then I went on to hold various positions, such as patrol. Most of my career was narcotics detective, intelligence detective, SWAT team, SWAT negotiator. In my role in the intelligence unit, I spent time with the United States Secret Service as a liaison for the police department in dealing with dignitary protection. Whenever we had a dignitary come into town, we did the visit. One of my major roles was transportation routes, making sure that president, vice president, king, queen, whatever, got into town safely and left town safely. So we normally partnered up with those Secret Service agents and basically played a key role in making sure that that visit was correct. But today I want to talk to you about the Trinity of a black cop. So first of all, what is a Trinity? I am a doctoral student at Howard University, and I just graduated from Morehouse School of Religion at the Interdenominational Theological Center. Woo woo, HBCU. So I think I can talk about this subject of the Trinity without fail. So I'm going to move some of this equipment over because I definitely want to have my Howard University stuff in the background. I want it to be seen. And my Morehouse School of Religion diploma. Got to brag, right? But what is a Trinity? A Trinity is all three parts equal one. All three parts that equal one, and each part is essential to the other. How one must be a part of the other and how it's communicative, meaning that they all work together for our good. Now, of course, the one Trinity that we know is God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. And we know that each one works in accordance with the other and is communicative. But we'll deal with more of that. Right now, I want to deal with the fact that the Trinity of the black cop, all three equal one, and each part is essential to the other. How one must be a part of the other and how it's communicative, meaning that they all work together for our good. Man, what a role. What a role. And again, I'm talking to you about something that I know a whole bunch about, okay? The black cop. Number one, the Trinity of the black cop. It includes culture, police, and community. Culture, police, and community. So, not so much in that order, but they all must work together. As the black officer, you have to be involved, as any officer, really. But I want to talk about the nuances of the black officer. Not so much in that order, but they all must work together. So, as a black person first, because that's what we are. And let me just start from the outset. Being a black person and me talking about the black officer is not a knock towards the white officer. I'm just talking about something that I know about. So as the black officer, we must be aware of culture. Now, number one, I want us to realize that in our culture, we are a diverse culture. We're not just one thing. In the Black culture, there's different cultures within the Black community. We have the upscale community. We have the working class community. We have a community that is on a poverty scale. And even with that, we have educated, we have the uneducated. But even with the uneducated, a lot of the uneducated are more educated than you think. So we've got all these various cultures within the Black community. And as that Black officer, we must be aware of that. We must understand that. We must know that these different genres exist within our own culture. So that is a must. And we can't lose our identity of the Black officer. In other words, we can't go in trying to be someone else. We are who we are. And there's a reason that we're called to be a police officer. Now, that's a whole nother subject within itself, but I'll deal with it real quick because I want to stay within the confines of the Trinity of a Black cop. But I believe it falls into the culture part of being the Trinity of a Black police officer. You know, a lot of times we've got to be secure in who we are. We can't be afraid of who we are. We've got to know who we are and whose we are. We can't go in wanting to be somebody else and take on a whole nother identity. We've got to be secure within ourselves, first off. As a Black police officer, you're sworn to serve and protect. We can't forget that. I think oftentimes we forget the purpose of what this institution of law enforcement really means. We are sworn to serve and protect. That's what we're called to do. That's what we take an oath. This was never be forgotten. It's an oath. It's a covenant made to our communities that you take on an oath. You are saying to your community that I am going to serve you and protect you. And I think when I say those words, I think this is one of the things that has been missing amongst police in general. And and you'll see the difficulties that the Black officer has as we go through this in the serving and protecting. You can never take on an us against them mentality. No police officer should ever take on this us against them mentality. That means that you're going to have to be a mediator. You're going to have to be the comforter. You're going to have to be the interpreter. You're going to have to be an enforcer. That's the role of any police officer, but especially the Black police officer. That's your role. That's what you are called to do. This us against them mentality is going to be short-lived. It's going to cause you stress. It's going to cause you strife, and it's going to cause your career to be one of a career that's going to be filled with internal affairs reports. It's going to be filled with hostility, and you just don't need it because most of the time you're going to be on that job as a police officer more than probably you're going to be at home with your own family. So you want to conduct yourselves accordingly. Now, you can't take on this us and them mentality. And you know, the Black officer in particular, along with all officers, you're going to have to be that mediator. And the mediator that you're going to have to become, believe it or not, is going to be between the offender or the situation that you are called to, and sometimes your fellow white officers, because they may not understand the culture of the situation as well as you do. And number one, let me say this: it's important for black males and black females to become police officers. And that's not a knock again against our white brothers and sisters, but it's important. Who else knows our community more than us, especially those who come from that community? See, I was fortunate enough to work in a community where I grew up in. So, and I also ran some of those same streets that I had to end up patrolling. So I knew both sides. You know what I mean? And I, as a member of law enforcement who grew up in that town, my insight was different, but also how I viewed people was different. I viewed people as citizens, as neighbors, as friends, as relatives, because I grew up there. So it made a big difference. You know what I mean? Let me see what else. Okay, let's deal with this thing about the police officer part of the Trinity. And you're going to have to be a mediator. And then sometimes you're going to have to be an interpreter. You know, there's things that we say, and there's the way that we say things that mean one thing that don't mean the same to others. Sometimes they just don't know. Sometimes they just don't know what we're talking about. We may use a language or some slang that may not go over well with somebody of another persuasion. So you're going to have to be an interpreter. You're going to have to be a comforter. A lot of times we as the black officer become the comforter more than the officer. And our white counterparts may not understand that move. And let me just say this. We are comforters, and you can never forget that. The black officer has to become the comforter, the interpreter, the mediator, and last but not least, you cannot forget that you still have to be the enforcer. That what that means is that sometimes you have to make the tough decision to stand in the middle of your community and your fellow officer. You're going to have to do that, and you're going to have to find a happy medium by doing that. And you're not standing in between the community and your fellow officer because you're a rebel, but you're looking at the greater good. In other words, sometimes your fellow officer may feel like, you know, hey, I'm gonna put these hands on this guy or this gal, and I'm going to arrest them, where you may say, hey, hold on, let me deal with this because I can deal with it another way, because you understand the culture. You understand you know what's going on. And it doesn't always mean that you have to you have to arrest somebody. And that's what I mean by culture. The first part, I told you about culture, police, and community. Culture is understanding the ways and the different genres within that culture. So you know, a lot of times you may stand in between your fellow officer and the community, and it might not be taken well. You know what I mean? A lot of times I've seen that happen, and you got to make that tough decision to do what you got to do. But also, what you have to do is be aware of what comes with that. Now, you've got to be able to understand that there's a lot of maturity that goes with being able to stand within your community and your fellow officer. In other words, you're making the decision to have somebody stand down while you take care of this particular problem. Because again, you don't do it as a rebel. You don't do it to be a superstar, but you do it for the greater good. In other words, this is difficult, but it's necessary action. And it's going to take maturity. But it's going to come sometimes with prejudice and misunderstanding. For instance, there were times when I would have to go to my sergeant, my superior officer, and say, hey, listen, allow me to intervene in this situation because I know the players involved. I know the atmosphere, And I believe that we all can come out of this as winners. Um, you know the culture again. You and more than likely you know the people involved. You may know the families if you come from that community, and you're going to have to stand in the gap because at the end of the day, tomorrow you want to live to see that. And one thing can go wrong because somebody didn't step in and just be the clearer head in the situation. All the things that I've seen with these incidents that have gone bad, where there's a police involved shooting, um, where there's somebody that got killed. It all has to do a lot with training, and it all has a lot to do with the lack of people having an understanding for the community in which they serve. And then the other part, let's just be real. A lot of times we've got to learn how to control our mouths. And I know I'll get some flack for this, but that's okay because I can explain it. And I have these arguments, sometimes we say, well, if only they would have complied. But then we see people comply and they still get hurt. And I don't understand that. But we're going to have to intervene in some situation. And I'll give you a perfect example. Let's look at the George Floyd situation. Man, just imagine if we would have had a black officer there that was bold enough to say, hey, listen, there's no need to keep your knee on this guy's neck. Okay, let's put him in custody. Let's get him in the car. Let's explain to him what's going on, and we can take care of it downtown. One of the things that I learned in my training was get the person out of the area so that we can get to a place where we can figure everything out. And sometimes that may mean putting cuffs on them, getting them in the car, and just getting out of there. And we can always say, hey, I'm sorry, or it was our mistake, or what have you. You get to live for another day. But those are the type of bold things that you got to do in most of these incidents. Even as a SWAT team member, there were often times, man, where we geared up, was ready to go hit the house with a battering ram and this, that, and the other. And I made a decision and talked to the sergeant or the person in charge, the officer in charge, and said, "Hey, wait a minute, hold on. I know this house. I know this house. If I felt like we weren't putting our team in danger, we had the search warrant. We were able to get in the location by law. We did the surveillance. We did the surveillance. Let me say it again. We did the surveillance enough to know that we were going to the right house for the right reason. Sometimes I made the decision just to knock on the door. Or if there were drugs involved, then I knew that it wouldn't be a wise decision to knock on the door and announce ourselves because they would have got rid of it. But if we surrounded the house and we were going after somebody in particular, well, they couldn't put themselves into the toilet. I'm just saying sometimes it doesn't take a whole bunch to effectuate an arrest or do your job as a police officer. Sometimes you just got to do the smart thing, and it doesn't take a whole bunch in order to do that. The black officer, it's you got to articulate your actions. After it's all done, when you make that extreme decision to stand in between the community and your officer, you've got to be able to articulate why you did what you did. And the reason that you do what you do is, again, because at the end of the day, everybody just wants to go home and live to see another day. And man, I'm so upset with this major pull out your gun and point and shoot mentality that we've incorporated in policing. Man, I rarely had to pull my gun because I practiced something called verbal judo. And that was decrease the situation. When I came upon a situation that I was dispatched to, I didn't come into it with, I'm going to get you, I'm going to arrest you, and that's it. And as the black officer, you've got to be three equal parts, three equal parts, and one part being essential to the other. And the part of knowing culture, knowing your police duties, and knowing the community, they all have to work as one, and they have to be communicative, and they all have to work together for the good. So you can never forget your oath of office. You can never forget that. But you still have to remember your role in the culture. Sometimes the stance that you take to become the intermediary between the community and police, it's a stance that everyone leaves unharmed. I learned that you could always take care of a situation later, excuse me, when cooler heads prevail. The black officer also, you got to have the connections to local resource that can help its citizens. You know, I used to go on calls, and it would be a call because it's an argument, because the wife, the husband, or the boyfriend and the girlfriend got into a fight because let's say a utility bill wasn't paid and the water was turned off or the lights were turned off. And man, this leads to a horrific argument. Well, you know, you need to know who you can call right away for an emergency restoration, or who you can refer those people to in order to get the finances to get something turned on, especially when there's a family involved. It's cold out. You want to be able to have those connections. You got to have those connections in the community with some of the politicians, elected officials, some of those people who are on boards. You got to know your community. And this is the role of every police officer, but especially the black officer in a minority community, because they're going to look at you as something different than just a regular police officer. They're going to look at you as all of these things. They're going to look at you, and I'm going to get into the community part now. The black officer must become a part of the community. The citizens have to know you more than just the cop who works in that city. You got to become the mentor. You got to become the athletic coach. You got to be the sneaker tire upper. You know what I mean? When you see somebody with sneakers that are untied, you got to be able to do that. You got to be father, mother, uncle, auntie, all without compromising yourself. Now, here we go into the one of three things, all equaling the same. In being uncle, auntie, dad, mom, all of that, friend, companion, in all of that, you still can never lose the oath that you take. You can't compromise yourself. In other words, you can't put yourself in a position that when you have to perform your duty as an officer, you can't let anything from preventing you to do this. Yeah, you might have just tied that young man's or that young lady's sneaker, but the dad is now in a situation that calls for you to effectuate a lawful arrest. And you have to do that. You can't say, oh man, I'm gonna feel bad if I do that because that kid sees me as a police officer. No, you still have to be a police officer. And that's the trinity of a black cop that I'm talking about. You got to know culture, you got to know police, you got to know community. Remember, you took an oath, and all of these things must work together for the good. Culture, police, community. All three equal one and are part essential to the other. You knowing the culture, you being a police officer and understanding the oath that you took, and you being a part of your community. It just makes a difference. When you're an officer and you're part of that community, it adds value to your police department. It adds value when you come up with ways of bridging the gap between the community and the police. When you come up with ideas that say, hey, listen, um, this platoon is going to have a basketball game, it's going to have a kickball game, it's going to have some type of cooking cook-off, food cook-off with members of your particular community that you serve in, your district, your beat. When you compete with each other in a friendly basis, you're dealing with community. And the culture part comes in because, well, if you're in a white community, and let's say you're in an Irish community, then you're going to know the culture of Irish people. And the competition that you have is going to be something dealing with the culture of that. If you work in an Italian community, then you're going to do something that Italians know about. And that's what you're going to do. You're going to have competition with something involving that culture. In the Black community or in the Hispanic community, you're going to do something that is generic to the Hispanic community and the Black community. That's community, that's culture, and that's police. And that's all things working together for the good. That's all three equal one and are part essential to the other. That's what the Trinity of a Black cop is. That means that you understand culture. You took the oath and understand the oath of a police officer to serve and protect, and you know the community. Listen, I believe that service is the rent that we pay for occupying this space here on earth. When we serve, we go every day with the mindset that when I put on this patrol uniform, when I put on this gun and badge, I'm doing it to go out to service those in my community. And I'm also going out to protect. In other words, when there's some bad stuff going down and I have to use my authority given to me, I'm going to do that to effectuate an arrest, but I'm going to do it in a way that it's not going to be disrespectful to a person. I'm going to see how I can do what I need to do with as less deadly force or as less force as necessary. Basically, when we take an oath, when we use force, the laws say that in order to effectuate a lawful arrest, you have the authority to utilize the level of force necessary to effectuate a lawful arrest. That's what that means. So pulling your gun out on a situation, what are you going to do now? If you escalate, if you look at the levels of escalation, if you pull your gun out, where else do you have to go? So, that's why you start off with a verbal judo. You start off with a dialogue to see how can we mediate this situation? How can we diffuse this situation without me going to another level? I'm not saying be a punk. I'm not saying being soft. All I'm saying is serving and protecting. It makes a difference. And let me tell you this, Black cop, before I log off here. It's necessary, first of all, for African Americans, male, female, to get on this department. On every department in your community, you need to take the test and get on these departments. It's necessary. We got to stop the Sandra Blands. We got to stop the Tamir Rices. We got to stop the Eric Garners. We got to stop all these things from happening, and we can do it. The George Floyd. We can do that because we know our community. So it's necessary, and we have to understand the Trinitarian process of being a Black cop. We've got to know culture. We got to know police. We got to know community. And we got to know that all these things must work together for the good. All three equal one and are part essential to the other. Listen, man, it is what it is, bro. Sis, all of you. No offense to my white officers. I didn't come on here to dog them, but I came to talk to folks that look like me who understand what I'm talking about. The black officer, the black female, the black male officer. You got to do for your community. All of you have to do for your community. I don't care what color it is. And if you are a white officer, listen to the black officer. Learn the culture that you work in. Understand that you cannot have a mentality of us against them. No, man. No, sis. It's not going to work. It's going to be short-lived. And you are always going to deal with crisis every day, all night, every day. If that's your mentality, then you need to take that badge and gun off. But if you really care for your community, you got to understand that you have taken an oath. You made a covenant to serve and protect. Hey, man, we're going to talk about this later on in another podcast, but I wanted to get this out before 2020 is over, because 2020, man, it's been a horrendous year for law enforcement. Let me say this. I love law enforcement. Okay. I spent 25 years with that uniform and my heart is still blue, but I know one thing, I'm black, and we got to repair what's going on. And I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to do my part in trying to repair what's going on. I'm going to try to do what I can to make law enforcement good in the eyes of the black community, because that's where I'm from. Hey, man, I love you all. Thanks for tuning in. And man, just know this. It is what it is.